Senator Waters.
Thanks very much, Chair. Welcome to WGEA and the Department. Hello, Minister. And if I can also place on record, much like Senator Moore did, our praise and best wishes for Helen Conway, who obviously is moving on, and I'm sure she'll continue to do wonderful work. So please pass that on behalf of the Greens. I want to start off with the gender changes that were announced yesterday, the instrument, which I've had a chance to read quite closely and which I had the benefit of a departmental briefing on last night. So thank you to Ms Wood for taking the time to do that. I do have some follow-up questions, some of which won't be a surprise, but hopefully you've had the chance to reflect on the unresolved issues and might be able to assist me now. So just starting off on the applications and interviews for managers, I'm interested in the quantum of people that might fall into that category. And we talked about you talked about the cost of gathering that additional data, and you'd aggregated it. And I was interested in just the cost of applications and interviews for managers as opposed to non-managers.
Senator, we have asked the agency and discussed today the number of employees covered by the reporting arrangements who would be in the manager category, and the estimate is it's about a quarter, but we'll have to take on notice the precise figure.
Okay, approximately a quarter of the total sample?
Yeah, okay. And the total is just around about 3.9 million. I think it's 3.89.
3.9. Okay, so it's about 1 million people we're talking about. Great. And were you able to progress the question of cost?
No, we have a total cost, but we haven't got it broken down.
Look, thank you for continuing to look at that for me. I'm interested also in the definition of promotion, because my concern when the proposal to drop the data collection for applications and interviews was announced yesterday, that might actually flow into people who are already within an organisation who might be applying for and interviewing for something that's considered a promotion or perhaps is a more senior role but not directly reporting to their current role. So I was interested to know from anyone who's able to tell me the definitional approach to promotion and whether you think applications for and interviews for promotions would still be captured.
Yes, so promotion refers to moving to higher duties.
Mm-hmm.
So in whatever way that happens, whether that be through a formal interview process or moved on in an informal way, that would be something that we would need to be working through when it comes to the implementation of those reporting matters to clearly define that. But we haven't gone through that process yet, given we've only just had certainty on the LI. So that's something to be worked through over the next little while.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'll await the confirmation, but I'll proceed on the understanding that applications for and interviews for a role within an organisation will not need to be reported on, and it will only be those folk who are actually successful in receiving a promotion that employers would have to report on. Was it considered in any part of the decision-making process the effect that might have on studying where the glass ceiling kicks in?
Senator, I think the approach, and again this was discussed extensively with the agency in coming up with the policy options that are reflected in the legislative instrument, was to look at which data is going to be the most robust. So certainly the outcomes data, the appointments, promotions and resignations, we can have more confidence in than the process data because that is captured in systems already. And it came again back to that idea of balance. We want data that provides insight, and that data definitely will provide insight into what's happening in an organisation, and data that will be a catalyst for an employer who identifies they have an inequality or a problem to actually then go and look at their own practices. So if they found that they were seeing a big disparity in appointments and promotions or resignations, they would need to actually look at their own practices, which could well include looking at their interview and application processes to actually unpack what's happening in their organisation. So again, it comes back to that idea that the data's primary purpose is for employers to actually take action and to inform them in a way that enables them to do that.
Okay, look, I understand that, but I guess the example I'm conceiving of is that if you're just tracking promotions data, you might, for example, have a 50-50 gender split of folk you're promoting, which might on its face seem like a great outcome. But if you were tracking the applications and interview stage, perhaps you had 90% women applying for those promotions, and yet a much reduced proportion of those women were then successful in getting the promotions. So my point is, I think the applications and interview stage tells the full story, and I'm concerned that we are now going to lose that data collection given the legislative instrument that's been announced yesterday.
I think that if I can kind of answer that, I think if you have a look at the promotions combined with actual composition and resignations and appointments, plus the company-specific pay gap data, you get a pretty robust picture of your gender equality performance. So particularly if you're having a look at there by certain manager categories, you're going to actually be able to see how many men and women sit in those roles, to what rate they're moving through the organisation, which is obviously the promotions piece, to what rate you're bringing them in, which is the appointments piece, and obviously what rate you're losing them, which is the resignation piece. So that is a leaps and bounds beyond where employers have been, and the agency feels gives a robust, accurate picture of how well employers are realising the potential of men and women in their workplace.
Okay, thank you. In the consultation process, and less so in the surveys and more so in the broader roundtable, so that the more qualitative consultation that you did, or actually even in the surveys, I'm interested in whether any of the participants in that consultation pushed for a change to the threshold of the size of employers that the rules apply to.
No, Senator, with that issue, I mean, we didn't go out to discuss that issue, but no one raised that issue.
No one raised that. And okay, so you're confident, you don't need to check your figures. Excellent, I'm pleased to hear it. And I'm interested also, sticking with the consultation, what proportion of the respondents, if you can separate it out by survey and then by those roundtables or consultations, as I think you've called them, were representative employers of 100 and above, and what proportion were representative employees, including women's groups, union groups, any other advocates who aren't employers?
Senator, I can give you the figures for, so the survey was employers. And
Was only employers?
that was only employers.
Okay, and that was the 523 that you mentioned earlier?
Sorry, there may have been a couple that were not employers. So the survey was open to anyone, but the questions were directed to employers who'd reported. We expect they were all...
Who were reporting as opposed to
Reporting.
had reported?
No, they had reported at the
I
point at
thought you
which...
said the survey was done before the reporting period had... after the period had finished,
Yeah,
before
yeah.
the results had been
Yeah,
revealed.
that's
Sorry,
right.
continue on.
What I can give you is a breakdown in a moment of the submissions received. There were 48. What did I do with that page? And by actual type of organisation.
Okay, I think I've got that. If that's what's on your
42.
website.
Yes, so
think
that
I've
was in the
got that.
consultation report. There were 42 submissions. 19 were reporting organisations, so they're employers. 16 were employer representatives. 1 was an academic group.
Sorry, employer or employee?
Employer.
Okay.
There was 1 employee representative organisation.
One.
Yes. 1 academic group. This is all on the website? This is all in the consultation report, yes.
Yeah.
And 5 that are broadly categorised as diversity experts and women's sector representatives. I mean, we weren't particularly, the fact that there were more submissions from employers didn't necessarily influence the extent to which the issues that were raised in them. We didn't say there were 19 from employers, so they have 19 times the weight. Given that the one employee representative submission was from the ACTU, obviously they're representing employee organisations more broadly.
So you weighted the submissions according to...
No, I was saying we didn't do that. I was saying we were looking for the full range of views from all the stakeholders to feed into the options that we developed.
Sure, but you had a majority of employer groups, so presumably you weighted the employee submissions to try to get a more balanced perspective, or are you saying no, you didn't?
Well, we didn't. It was qualitative, so it wasn't that kind of, it wasn't a mathematical exercise. It was qualitative input, and we looked at the issues that were raised.
Okay. So there were 7 non-employer groups that had input into the consultation.
Is a broad.
Sorry.
representative body convention.
Sorry, I'll just clarify that. So the ACTU was part of the Coalition for Working Women who made a submission, and one union made a separate submission, which was the SDA.
Okay, thank you. All right, that does seem a little unbalanced, but thank you for taking those questions. All right, I want to move now to the ABS data that was released today that unfortunately showed an increase in the gender pay gap, which is now sadly at its highest in more than 2 decades. Does the agency or the department have a view, or does anyone have an understanding on why that's getting worse?
It's a difficult question.
Alison Moorhead, Group Manager, Workplace Relations Policy Group, Department of Employment. There are a range of reasons as to why the gender gap might get bigger or smaller at any time. I mean, I guess it's best to start with a national picture. So at the national level, if we take all the employees in the country and divide them into males and females, there is a gap in the average hourly rate. The ABS preferred data comes from their EEH survey, and that the most up-to-date one there we have is May 2014. They also run the AWE survey, but the ABS has advised that the best survey to use to create the gender pay gap figures are from the EEH survey.
And sorry, what does that stand for?
It stands for Employee Earnings and Hours.
Right.
They only run that survey every 2 years because it's very expensive and very detailed. It takes a proper sample of employees from its sample of workplaces, and it gets the actual pay figures. So what that data tells us is that as at May 2014, if you take all the employees in the country, and by all employees I do mean it's actually 90% of workers are in this figure, the average hourly rate of pay is $35.30 as at May 2014. For men, the average hourly rate of pay is $37.60. For women, it is $32.50. That gives you a gender pay gap of 13.6%. So that's when we take everybody from all the different occupational groups around the country, and that's the ABS's preferred way from their statistics, from all the survey data they collect, the ABS, that's their preferred survey to use.
So where does the 18.8 figure come from then?
The 18.8 figure is when you look at what someone who is full-time
Right.
earns over a week. The trouble with that is men tend to work 4 hours a week on average more than women. So that 4 hours, so when you're talking about full-time employees, on average you're talking about a man who is actually working 4 more hours a week than a woman. And so the gender pay gap gets bigger because simply for the reason that there is more hours actually being worked and thus paid for.
So
by
are you
the
saying
male
when
employee.
they break down the full-time adult average weekly ordinary time earnings, that they're using a different measure, a different number of hours for women than they are for men, and they don't think to mention that in their table somewhere?
They do actually mention it in the footnote, and they mention there's quite a lengthy. They've done a really good article that's available on the internet on how to use their gender data, the ABS, and it's excellent and it is worth reading. And so going on from that, we look at that and then we go, why is this the case? Why is this the case? Because it's a gap. It's a 13.6% gap on an hourly rate. Now, that includes bonuses, by the way. That's all the cash that the employee gets. So it does include bonuses, and it actually also includes overtime. So that's why we prefer to use it and why the ABS likes it. And the biggest reason, if you have to say what's the reason, the absolute biggest reason is that just like work that's done in the home, work that's done in the labour force is gendered. Men tend to go into different types of jobs than women, just like that happens within a household. And so, I guess the fact is
that
jobs...
does actually have an influence, but yes, I'm ignoring that. Please continue.
The jobs are not randomly assigned in the economy to men or women. It's not randomly assigned. Just like jobs within a household, they're not randomly assigned. They're discussed, they're worked over, and women tend to go into jobs and occupational groups and industries that we call the more feminised industries. The fact that they're doing a different job means that they have different rates of pay, and that explains a lot of that gap.
Okay. I'm interested in that particular point, and so I have a particular example I want to put to you, but when you say it explains a lot, do you have a sense of how much it explains?
Various
Are you able to quantify that?
various academics try and quantify it. So they try and look at how much that explains. I think we feel comfortable saying that that is a major driver, and in fact, if you look at the ABS website, that's what they conclude. They say that one of the biggest drivers for the pay gap is the compositional nature of the labour force.
It's a different type of work. I get the concept.
So the thing is, so say a woman would start off in a particular type of job, then once she's in that job, it's gender. It does have a gendered nature to it, and so what we find, for example, with nurses. So they get into the job as a nurse, and then their career structure is based around the nursing. And so the jobs sort of continue on year after year. They are quite gendered. It would be unlikely that a nurse may then switch to a highly paid mining job in Western Australia during the mining boom. Okay. She's not the type of person who's going to get that higher pay by switching over to working underground in a mine.
All right. Look, thank you. I think I'm following you there, and I'm just conscious of time. Well, I don't mean to cut you off. I'm interested, particularly, there was an example in the graduate jobs and earnings study, which was released in 2013 not by a government body, by a mob called Graduate Careers Australia, but I understand it's a reasonably fulsome and comprehensive study. And I discussed this with the ABS in the last estimates, although unfortunately, due to reasons that escape all of us, was not able to do so this week. In that particular study, one example which has stuck in my head was that there were still some examples, although, as you say, not the majority, but some examples of exactly the same job and men and women being paid differently, which of course is patently unacceptable. The example they gave was of dentistry graduates. I'm interested in if that has been updated, or, and as well, do we know of any other examples where the gap is so patently obvious in that it's the same job, acknowledging that that's not the majority of the problem, but that it is some part of it?
That is without doubt a problem. It's without doubt a problem. Now, the reasons as to why it exists are many. So, for example, women dentists might decide to have a child. They might decide to take time out of the workforce. They might decide to actually return to work on a lower career trajectory.
This one was that graduate starting salary, though, which was interesting because it factored out all of those other influences. Yeah,
it's definitely a problem. There's just no doubt that there's a problem there.
So I'm seeking to get any more concrete examples, or the extent
there is.
of the
I think
problem?
that there's quite a few examples like that of the professions.
If you look at what we've uncovered through our pay equity campaign, and one of the minimum requirement to be a pay equity ambassador was to acknowledge, and this wasn't something that we just created, it was what the CEOs themselves told us, was that gender bias is real in workplaces, and unless you analyse your payroll data, you will have instances of women being paid less than men doing the same or comparable work. So these are, 62 CEOs representing hundreds of thousands of employees who acknowledge that this unconscious bias happens. So I don't think we'll ever get to the perfect data set, but what employers need to do is analyse their data and take action to ensure that the instances aren't occurring.
And luckily for people like a dentist or the other graduates who are in that survey, they've got very good career prospects. So that's why we like looking at the national figure, and it's like saying, well, with graduates, they have a lifetime of very strong earnings ahead of them.
Okay. I'm conscious of the time. I've just got one final question. I'm not sure who's best to answer it. Recently at the G20, there was a government commitment, which we praised the government for at the time, committed to lifting participation of women in the workforce by 25% by 2025. But my understanding is there's no policy instrument to give effect to that commitment. So I'm asking, is anybody working on such a policy instrument, and how has anybody been asked to work on that issue? And if so, what's the update so far?
Senator Cash is leading on that for the government.
Okay. Is anyone able to elaborate on that?
I mean, well, there's a range of measures that the government has put in place to ensure that that women's, careers can progress, etc. I mean, one of the big issues is to make sure there are jobs that women can do. It's a much bigger issue than people might give it credit for. So we need to have jobs that are part-time, we need to have jobs that are casual, we need to have short-hour jobs, we need to have the ability for women to come in and out of the workforce as their unpaid work responsibilities demand.
So flexible working hours.
Yeah.
Is there work, I know the Greens have a bill for flexible working hours and have had for a few years in this place. Is there any work being done from the government perspective on that flexible working hours?
Yes, we have legislation before the Senate called individual flexibility arrangements to flesh them out a bit more.
Ones that don't erode other workplace rights would be ideal, but perhaps there's not the time to go into that.
Senator, all I would invite you to do is not listen to the rhetoric, but have a look at the actual legislation, and you will see that that assertion is without foundation.
All right, thank you. I will have a look, although I suspect that I won't like what I see. Thank you. I will have a look. Thanks very much, all of you.